Listen carefully, because what you're about to hear is not motivation. It's not comfort. It's not something designed to make you feel good. It's something far more dangerous than that. It's truth, and truth doesn't care about your feelings. You've been lied to your entire life, not in obvious ways, not in ways you could easily detect, but in subtle, repeated patterns, conditioning your mind, shaping your beliefs, training you to accept less. You think you're struggling because you don't have money. Wrong. You're struggling because you've been programmed to think like someone who doesn't deserve it. Read that again in your mind, because that right there is the difference between people who rise and people who stay exactly where they are. The world doesn't feel sorry for the weak. It studies them, uses them, builds systems around them, feeds off them. And the moment you start looking for sympathy, you don't get help. You get labeled, controlled, positioned. You don't even realize it. But the second you say, I need help, you're quietly telling the world, I can be managed. That's how power works. Not loud, not obvious, but precise. And today, you're going to break that pattern. Because this isn't a video about getting rich. This is a video about becoming dangerous. Drop this in your mind right now. My mind is my greatest asset. 1. Poverty is a mental condition. You were never born small. You were trained to become small. Nobody wakes up one day and decides to think limited. It's installed, slowly, repeatedly, through environment, through expectations, through fear. You were taught to play safe, to avoid risk, to be realistic. But let's translate that honestly. You were taught to stay controlled, because a person who never questions their limits never escapes them. The real trap isn't lack of money. It's the belief that you can't have more. That belief spreads like an invisible infection. It enters your thoughts, then your decisions, then your habits, until your entire life reflects it. You start settling, accepting, justifying. You say things like, it's just how life is. This is enough. I'm grateful for what I have. And gratitude is powerful, but not when it becomes a cage. Because there's a difference between appreciating what you have and convincing yourself you don't deserve more. That's submission disguised as humility. And once your mind accepts that role, you don't need chains anymore. You become your own prison. Every time you hesitate, every time you doubt yourself, every time you choose comfort over growth, you reinforce that identity. And here's the harsh reality. The system benefits from that version of you. It doesn't want thinkers. It wants followers. Because followers don't challenge power. They sustain it. But the moment you start thinking differently, you become unpredictable. And unpredictability is power. You must destroy the version of yourself that accepts limitation. Not slowly, not gently, completely. Because weak thinking doesn't negotiate, it dominates until you eliminate it. Every thought matters. Every internal sentence shapes your reality. So when your mind says, I can't, you don't comfort it, you challenge it. That's where transformation begins. Say this internally, I refuse to think small. 2. Power is not real, it's perceived. Here's something most people never understand. People don't respond to truth. They respond to perception. How you appear matters more than what you are. Uncomfortable? Yes, but real. You can be capable, but if you look uncertain, you'll be ignored. You can be inexperienced, but if you carry certainty, you'll be followed. Because humans don't analyze deeply. They scan quickly. They read posture, tone, energy, presence, and within seconds they decide where you stand. If you look unsure, you're placed below. If you look grounded, you're placed above. That's how silent hierarchies form. And once you understand this, you stop relying on chance. You start controlling perception. You don't wait to feel confident. You act confident until your mind catches up. Because confidence isn't always real. Sometimes it's practiced. And practiced long enough, it becomes identity. You control your expressions. You slow your movements. You reduce unnecessary reactions. You speak less. But when you speak, it carries weight. That's not acting. That's strategy. Because people don't respect explanations. They respect presence. The more you try to prove yourself, the weaker you look. The less you explain, the more they assume. And assumption is where power lives. You don't need to dominate conversations. You need to control them. And control doesn't come from noise. It comes from restraint. Start observing more than reacting. Start responding instead of rushing. That shift alone changes how people treat you. Say this: I control how I am perceived. 3. Seeking approval destroys power. Most people are not chasing success. They're chasing acceptance. They want validation, recognition, approval, and they don't even realize that this need makes them weak. Because the moment your value depends on others, you lose control over it. You start adjusting yourself to fit expectations. You speak differently, act differently, think differently. Not because it's who you are, but because you want to be accepted. That's the trap. You trade authenticity for approval. And in that trade, you lose power. Because now, you're controlled by reactions. If they like you, you feel good. If they don't, you question yourself. That's not strength. That's dependency. Strong individuals don't chase validation. They operate without needing it. They don't explain themselves endlessly. They don't justify every decision. They don't seek permission to exist. They move quietly, decisively, and that silence creates authority. Because people respect what they don't fully understand. The more predictable you are, the easier you are to control. The more mysterious you become, the more influence you gain. Stop explaining everything. Stop defending every move. Let people misunderstand you, because clarity isn't always power. Sometimes ambiguity is. Say this: I don't need approval to move forward. 4. Think like you're already powerful. Most people wait. They wait to feel ready, wait to feel confident, wait for the right moment. That moment never comes. Because confidence doesn't come first. Action does. You don't become powerful, then act like it. You act like it, and grow into it. Carry yourself differently, speak differently, think differently. Not based on your current situation, but based on where you're going. Your environment doesn't define you, your standards do. Even if you have nothing, you can still operate with control. You can still be composed, still be focused, still be disciplined. And that energy changes everything. People respond to certainty. If you walk like you belong, they assume you do. That's how authority is built. Not through titles, not through money, but through presence. You don't rush, you don't panic, you don't react emotionally. You observe, you calculate, you decide. That's leadership. Say this: I operate from strength, not circumstance. 5. Detachment creates control. The more you need something, the less control you have over it. Think about that. If you need approval, people can manipulate you. If you need attention, people can ignore you. If you need outcomes, you make desperate decisions. Need creates weakness. Detachment creates power. When you stop needing, you start choosing. You're no longer reacting emotionally. You're responding strategically. You don't chase, you attract. Because your energy shifts, you become calm, grounded, unpredictable. And unpredictability is intimidating. People don't know how to handle someone who doesn't react. That's where control comes from. You're not cold, you're selective. You care, but you don't depend. That's the difference. Say this: nothing controls my emotions. 6. Use pain as information. Pain is not random. It's data. Every failure, every rejection, every betrayal, it teaches you something. But most people don't learn. They react emotionally. They complain, blame, avoid. And in doing that, they waste the lesson. Pain shows you patterns, who to trust, what to avoid, where you're weak. It strips illusions, reveals truth, and truth is power. If you can stay calm during pain, you gain an advantage most people never will. Because while others break, you evolve. You analyze instead of reacting. You adjust instead of collapsing. That's how you turn suffering into strength. Say this: I use pain as fuel. 7. Master yourself or be controlled. Everything comes down to one thing: self-control. If you can't control your emotions, someone else will. If you can't control your focus, you'll be distracted. If you can't control your actions, you'll regret them. Discipline is not restriction, it's power. It gives you the ability to choose instead of react. Most people are impulsive. They speak too quickly, act too emotionally, decide too carelessly. That makes them predictable. And predictable people are easy to control. But when you become disciplined, you become dangerous. You pause, you think, you act with intention. That's control. And control is power. Say this: I control myself completely. Ending: you were never weak. You were trained to think weak. Break that training, because once you control your mind, everything else follows. You don't need permission. You don't need validation. You don't need luck. You need discipline, awareness, control. That's how power is built. Silently, consistently, relentlessly. So stop saying you're stuck. Stop saying you're broke. You're not. You're untrained power. And once you realize that, everything changes.